Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the GEEK WOLD GQ20. Before I actually get into the review, let me just give you a little bit of history about GEEK WOLD so that we can situate ourselves better. GEEK WOLD kind of made a name for itself a few years back by introducing what was in effect the cheapest tribrid at the time. It was called the GQ10 and it was made up of DD, BA, and piezoelectrics. The overall, I guess, presentation was decent enough for what they were attempting. Although, yes, you could see some flaws. The driver coherence wasn't the best. You could distinguish quite well between the drivers. The bass was a little bit in the boomy side, but it was fun. The mids were a little bit detached from the bass, but again, it wasn't really that bad. And the piezos, you could feel that they were there, and they could get a little bit metallic and harsh at times. But overall, the reality is for the $50 that it cost, it wasn't a bad attempt, and it deserves its merit. That was then followed by the GQ80, which that was a bit of a disappointment, so I'm really not going to talk too much of it, and the actual sales represent the failure that it was to a certain extent. And then they kind of went quiet. They were focused mainly on their TWSs, and now over after a long period of development, they came out with the GQ100 earlier this year. The GQ100 featured 2 BAs, 3 DDs, and 4 piezoelectric drivers, divided into into two drivers of 2 elements. And that was an IM that I actually praised relatively highly. I thought that it was well conceived. What they were obtaining, or what they were trying to obtain, they managed to do it. It had much better driver coherence as compared to the previous attempts at this setup. The bass was great. The mids were handled by a dynamic driver, were also great. If there was any flaw, there was that sometimes the upper mids and treble could get a little bit on the harsh side, and a little bit of that metallicness of the piezo was noticed. But overall, nothing aggressive, nothing that was really a deal breaker. At the time, I even compared it and said that it was like kind of having a budget, an IVipQ. Such was the detail retrieval capability of the GQ100, and in that aspect, technically wise, the GQ100 is really a good IM. It's got its flaws, as I mentioned, but technically, and if that is your thing, if you're into listening to the last twinkly and sparkly and everything, that's the IM for you. There were some people that, like I said, complained about its excessive energy, or not excessive, but the energy that sometimes could be a little bit excessive in the mids and the highs. And at the time, I even proposed a small little mod, which you could do, which was quite easy, which basically entails on the actual tip, you introduce, like as you can see here, a medium density foam into it. And that basically does is lower a little bit the energy from 7K upwards. And that amount that it drops is enough to basically eliminate that metallicness that occasionally is present. And for me personally, it becomes perfect. I mean, it is really, really nice and a real pleasure to listen to. They've got now, complementing that GQ100, 3 other models. The GQ200 priced higher at around $330 and using a different configuration. They've got the GQ20, which is this one I have here today, which is priced at $100, which uses a similar configuration to the GQ200, to the older brother. And they're also going to have the GQ10S, which is again similar in its configuration to this one. As for the GQ20, this is the box that it comes with. Simple, straight to the point, no frills, nothing's fancy. Some specs here in the back. They talk about a 10 ohm impedance and 105 dBs of sensitivity. It's a 3D printed resin shell. The box is again a simple affair, nothing fancy. Over there comes the actual IMs, and inside this case comes the carrying case of the IM, which is this one over here. And you get 2 sets of tips. You get these ones here, okay, which I used to start with. They're not bad. They, I guess, are okay. And then it also brings a set of tips like these ones over here. Okay. Now, in either case, the tips are not bad. The tips are fine, I guess. But for the GQ20, they're not the ideal. And I actually recommend using the H570. The same tip that's used, for example, in the Night Oblivion Butastur. With that tip, the GQ20 becomes something very nice to listen to. Case, simple, that's it. IM, cable, acceptable, nothing, 4.4 termination, nothing really offensive there. Doesn't tangle, it's got nice quality to it, a nice feel to it. The IM, as I mentioned, it's a 3D printed shell. It's got a nice faceplate design, Geek World, with the model number on the side of the shell. And it's just nice. It's a very nice IM. Not really that big, thick, but not really that big when you consider the number of drivers which it has inside, which I'll get to in a moment. 2-pin connection, and as you can see, I'm using these H570 tips. Okay, there we go. As for the configuration, it uses one single piezoelectric driver with 2 elements, which handles the ultra high frequencies. That's then complemented by 3 BAs, 2 of them handling the high frequencies, and 1 handling basically full range, but it's focused on the mids. So the mids of the GQ20, the meat of the frequency range is handled by that single BA, and then it is then complemented by a dynamic driver, which is a bespoke unit made by them, which is dual diaphragm, dual magnetic system. One of the diaphragms is LCP, and the second diaphragm is titanium. The titanium handles the ultra low frequency, so the sub bass, and the LCP handles the bass. So in effect, what that means is that we have a 4-way crossover splitting the frequencies this way. So sub bass, bass, mids, high frequency, and then the piezo ultra high frequencies. But the crossover in itself is actually a 4-way crossover. Fit. No issues. I had absolutely no problem with the fit. It fits nicely. It's got a nice shape. It's ergonomic. I was able to get the tip nicely into my ears like I like to, so to avoid any unwanted resonance or peaks or so on. And that's it. So it's solid enough. Okay. What about the sound? Well, this is a V-shaped signature. Although graphically it looks somewhat similar, and it's got some elements of its GQ100 older brother, the sound that comes out is very much V-shaped, and it's a substantially darker sound. Why? Because after that 8K, more or less 8K, it subsides down. The energy goes down quite a bit. So the piezoelectric is working there, but it's working in a very subdued manner. Very much like was the case in the BQYZ Topaz. The BQYZ Topaz, if some of you remember, and that's why I've got it here, is a budget entry IM from BQYZ using a dynamic driver and a piezoelectric. And a lot of people actually were like surprised, because instead of listening and hearing that usual piezoelectric presence, because it's noticeable, that metallicness, like the same way that BAs have their timbre and planars have their timbre, and that tonality, piezos also do. And people were surprised that you really couldn't notice it. And the truth was, it was a very good implementation. Okay, it wasn't perfect by no means, but it was a very good implementation. And the same thing applies itself here to the GQ20. It's got a nice solid bass. Considering its 2 drivers, I was expecting a little bit more. I'm not going to deny that. I was expecting a little bit more, and considering that the driver that's doing those, that's handling those frequencies, is in essence basically the same driver as the GQ100, it's actually interesting to see how the fact that there has got more extension up top is able to make the bass then sound more dynamic and cleaner. Actually, on the GQ100, one of the piezoelectric elements is in front of the bass driver, is mounted on top of the bass driver, precisely to clean up somehow. I don't know the intricacies of that, of how that is done, but precisely to clean up the quality, the texture of the bass. And over here, I don't know if they've done the same thing or not. Maybe they have, but it's noticeable that the bass is just a little bit less clean than over there. It's just extra little bit cleaner over there. The fact that also it's got more extension, the GQ100, also contributes to that. There's a relatively big recess then in the mids. It is, and the mids are kind of the majority of the mids are a little bit on the second plane of things. And then you have a pin again, which is relatively abrupt, reaching 12-13 dBs of gain, the same thing into the bass, and male and female vocals, although present, they are both recessed. I guess of the 2, ultimately still the male vocals might be the ones that are better reproduced, but they are not, the vocals are not where I would say the GQ20 is shining. Extension also is a little bit on the darker side. So overall, what we are getting in the GQ20 is a solid enough presentation. I mean, the whole frequency response is very nicely done. That's nothing wrong with it, but it's just a darker presentation. It's not, apologies. So overall, the sound is a darker presentation, but it's a nice darker presentation. It's not as technical as the GQ100, no way. It's evident that it doesn't have the same sort of soundstage, the same sort of detailed retrieval, the same sort of imaging, but it's not offensive at the same time. This is, in my opinion, a good implementation of the technology that GEEK WOLD uses. But for those of us, or for those of you that are perhaps a little bit adverse to that metallicness of the piezo, don't want such a bright presentation, but want to give this setup that they have become known for a go. And the GQ20 in that aspect does the job. Now, having said all of that, if you use the H570 tips like I'm using, that does help and does contribute to give us just a little bit extra openness in the sound, which the stock tips just don't do. The stock tips are, on the one hand, these particular ones here are just too soft, and they actually make the bass even more pillowy than what it is. Okay, so that's the reason why I don't like these tips. Although again they are relatively wide bore, as you can see, they just don't open up the sound enough. The tips just don't match the GQ20, period. The H570, it's a completely different tip. I mean, first of all, it's structurally much harder, so it helps tighten up the bass. It helps make the bass cleaner, more precise, definitely. And being again wide bore, it does open up the sound just enough for things to be, at least for me, entertaining. I would, and I'm not going to deny it, I would like a little bit more energy. That's true. I would have liked a little bit more detail, especially because I know that there's a piezo here, so it would be nice if it had just a little extra energy up top. But it's not offensive, it's not fatiguing, and you know, it's an easy IM to listen to. It's an IM that very much will, if maybe some of you have the ones that I have selected here, will give you very much the same sort of sound. Okay, all right. Let's then break it down here, or compare it with what I have. I've got the GQ100, as I said. I've got the HiDes MS3, the Tangzhou, the Fudu, and the BQYZ Topaz. Compared with the GQ100, as I was mentioning it already earlier, I mean, they are completely polar opposites. Having that one doesn't make sense, obviously, to buy this one unless you want something which is substantially darker and not as technically proficient. But you know, it is interesting, I guess, if you do want to have the two models just for the sake of seeing what a cheaper model or cheaper version of that tech can do, although they are not entirely the same. And one of the biggest differences that happens here is that this relies on the BA to do the mids, while that one there relies on a dynamic driver to do the meat of the mids, and then it's got double the piezoelectric units, which then allow it to have more extension in the upper mids and treble, which this one does not have. This one only has a single unit. So technically GQ100, the bass there is, although it's basically the same quantity, because the rest of the frequency range is handled in a completely different manner. It's a cleaner, more dynamic bass, and the mids and the highs, especially the vocals, they sound more present. They're not recessed by any manner, which is the sensation that you sometimes get here on the GQ20. That sound of the GQ100, as I mentioned, is a sound which kind of has that an Oli VX tune. Okay, that's the sound that you get there. Over here, although graphically it kind of seems like that, no, what it actually does sound like is a very prominent V signature. Loads of emphasis on the bass and the treble, although you would think, okay, V-shaped, there would be a bit of an emphasis on the treble. It's there, but it's just a very small section of that treble which comes as, you know, that actually shines slightly. Perhaps to be more correct, you could say that this is more kind of an L signature than really a V signature. Maybe that would be perhaps even the better way of characterizing the GQ20. Compared then to the other ones that I've got here, the Topaz, they've got a very similar sound, very similar vibe. This one does edge out the Topaz in just being a little bit cleaner up top, upper mids and treble, although the bass there on the Topaz is slightly superior. So I guess it's a tie here between the two of them. That one there as well only uses 2 drivers. This one here is using significantly more drivers. I mean, we're using 3, 4, 5, 6 drivers here. So when you do the math with that respect, I guess the Topaz comes out as the winner. But I would consider them as a tie in terms of the sound. The Fudo is the 1+2, as is the MS3. And straight away, the thing that's evident in both of these models is that the bass there is on a different level, not only in terms of quality, but in terms of quantity. The bass of the Fudo it's a big, warm bass. It's got loads of dynamics. It's very fun. It's very engaging. It's a loads of fun. The mids and treble on the Fudo, a little bit second plane when compared to the bass, not on the same level of energy, but equally as well done. And what it gives us is basically a sound which is non-fatiguing, maybe not the most technically proficient, but compared to the GQ20, neither of them are technical marvels. They would trade blows here, honestly, in terms of the technicalities. I would say timbre and tonality, that one has a better timbre and tonality, although the timbre and tonality here of the GQ20 is pretty decent. The detailed retrieval, I would say the detailed retrieval is for the Fudo. Soundstage, basically the same thing. Imaging, basically the same thing. So, I'm not going to say a tie. I'm not going to say it's a clear winner. I would say that they have a similar kind of vibe in terms of the sound, just different configurations. That as well costs $80, so it is a little bit cheaper, but it is what it is. The MS3, slightly more expensive than the GQ20. We're talking about $112. And straight away, when you listen to it, especially in the setup I have with the red nozzle, the bass is different league of bass. It's clean, it's dynamic, loads of energy, very, very nicely executed bass. The transition into the mids, into the upper mids, and the energy that's there in the mids and the upper mids, fantastic. It's a very slow progressive pin again, picking it around 4K. Very, very, very well done. Honestly, when you look at the graph and then you listen to it, there is I would say a noticeable disparity between what you see and what you're expecting when you see the graph and then what you listen. A way more open sound than on the GQ20. Perhaps that's the openness that I have there is the openness that I would have liked the GQ20 to have, because no, the MS3 is not on the level of the GQ100. No, it isn't. But compared to the GQ20, it is superior. So yes, I would say that this is a better IM than the GQ20 for a little bit less money. Technically more capable, better detailed retrieval, better soundstage, better imaging. Timbre and tonality also equally as competent. So technically better than the GQ20, better bass. Mids, I would say they're basically the same thing. It's the upper mids and treble there which have been very nicely done, especially when you consider that looking at the graph you don't expect it. Okay, and there you have it, guys. I mean, I guess you could say the GQ20 is a nice solid budget IM relatively budget IM from Geek World, offering this technology that they are becoming more and more known for, but in reality, the thing that it would need or would require, for at least in my view, for it to be a true winner, is to have had a little bit more energy as compared to the GQ100. I'm not saying having the same energy or the same detailed retrieval capabilities as the GQ100, otherwise then if it was as good as the GQ100, then the GQ100 wouldn't have a reason to exist. But I think that they've maybe subdued too much the piezo here. Maybe the piezo is just been smothered a little bit extra, and it doesn't come across. It doesn't shine. It's not offensive. It's not gonna fatigue you. That's for sure. But it also doesn't shine. Okay. Anyway, guys, I'll show you now the graphs and we'll wrap it up. Take care. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section for the GQ20. This is the graph of the GQ20, and as you can see, by the looks of it, definitely V-shaped. However, the reality is the upper mids and the treble don't sound, at least to me, as energetic as what you would think here. I think, well, it could be, you could argue that one of the reasons for that would be the energy that it has from the bass coming from behind, but not really, because, and I'll show you now, this is the GQ20, sorry, the GQ100. Okay, that's the GQ100. Actually, let me just change the color so you can see it a little bit better. Let me make it this color here. Okay, so that's the GQ100. 07 tip. As you can see, the bass is basically the same. It just doesn't dip as much here. Rises very similar, very similar. Nevertheless, when you listen to it, it's completely different. Okay, the fact that the GQ20 has the mids being handled by the BA, and the GQ100 has the mids being handled by the dynamic driver, is straight away, I think, one of the main reasons for that. Okay, and then as you can obviously see, there's way more extension here on the GQ100, way more extension. Just out of curiosity, so you guys can understand, that small mod that I do with adding the little foam to the nozzle, okay, the medium density foam, basically does this. Just lowers this little bump here before we reach 5Ks ever so slightly, and reduces here as well ever so slightly. The difference, although it looks minimal, and it is minimal in effect, it is noticeable in how just this little extra coming down of the energy makes that piezo then sound way smoother. It just sounds very nice. And look, the GQ100 is a very competent IM. I mean, I heard some people complaining and saying this and this and that, and I think a lot of the times is they forget how difficult it is to implement the number of drivers they try to implement there, and actually get a sound which comes out this way. It sounds really good. The GQ100, there's nothing wrong with it. It sounds really good. Technically, it is a beast of an IEM, a beast. And as you can see, that little mod, it just further enhances it. So let me just take it away here. Okay, leave just the 100 with the 20 once again. So they are totally polar opposites in terms of the sound that comes out. As I said, one is going to be technically capable and fun and everything, while the other one is going to be very warm sounding. It doesn't have that extra energy up top. So maybe for those that are not fans of it, yes, it could make sense. So that's the GQ100. Now let's stop the BQEYZ, the topaz. That's the BQEYZ. As you can see, the balance that is struck here is a better balance. There is not as much bleed into the mids, and the bass is really not the issue. The bass on the topaz is better in terms of its quality and quantity, actually, to the GQ20, because don't forget it's also got a much bigger driver, but they've also kind of subdued a lot the upper mids and treble, so it ends up sounding equally as dark. Yes, it's non-aggressive in the terms of the piezo. It's not harsh and anything of the sort, but ultimately the GQ20 does better. It does do it better, and the GQ20 is a better IEM. That's the reality. The GQ20 is capable of being more complete. It's not a huge difference. It's not a bloodbath or anything of the sort, but it is a better IEM. If you now consider the fact that there's this amount of driver difference between one and the other, then I could argue that maybe the GQ20 is not maybe the outright winner. The topaz will probably be the winner there. Okay, so that's the topaz out. Let's now look at the Tangzu. This is the Tangzu. It's a better IEM, the Tangzu. Okay, that's the reality. It's better IEM. It's also a little bit on the darker side. Again, no technical beast, but a little bit more capable than the GQ20. I mean, that's the reality. And it's got a very nice balance struck between the bass, the mids, and the highs. It's honestly a very nice sounding IEM. It's fun, it's engaging, and the bass quality is really good. The bass quality on the Tangzu is fantastic. The mids by themselves, just the mids by themselves, I guess you could say they trade blows, okay? But overall, the mids, the upper mids and treble on the Tangzu are more uniform, more balanced out, and there's extension there. You can feel that there's just that little extra extension which is missing in the GQ20, and if it had that extension, it would be perfect. If the GQ20 had the extension that you hear on the Tangzu, then the GQ20 would be probably making more sense. And finally, the MS3, which is this one. Basically the same sort of bass, but completely different when you listen to it. I mean, the bass of the MS3 is phenomenal. It is, that's it. Okay, fine, you can argue that, oh, it's bleeding into the mid slightly and this and that, and then the pin gain is very relaxed, so it's going to be a bloated mess, and no. When you listen to the MS3 is genuinely a very nice IM, because the bass quality comes from a very good driver, and because it is a high quality driver doing the bass, although it is, let's say, exaggerated this way, it sounds really good. Again, this sort of signature is a signature which kind of reminds me of what you get on some of ISN's and Penon's products, where the emphasis is very much placed on the bass, but because they always choose a very high quality driver, that bass that comes across is a good quality bass. You know, that's the secret here. You can have a lot of bass, and you just have to look at, for example, the Maestro Mini and some other IMs which are more high end and have all these monstrous amounts of bass. The only reason they get away with it is because they've used a good quality driver. That's it. And that's exactly what's happening here. The MS3 is using a high quality driver, so although it's got a emphasis on the bass tuning, it is a nice bass. It's clean, it's dynamic, it's fast, it's got texture. You know, it doesn't really bleed that amount, or it doesn't really camouflage or overpower the mids that much. And then the mids, chilled, relaxed, very nicely done, nothing, no aggressiveness, smooth. This is a coupler related peak, and yes, there is a certain amount of peak there, but it's not aggressive, it's not sibilant, got a good extension. It's just a very nice IM. So yes, it is a superior IM than the GQ20, and it costs not that much more. So there you have it. And as I said earlier, I mean, the GQ20 is a solid IM. It is. Okay, whether or not it will make sense is something which I leave it to you guys to decide if you want to get it or not. I think that they should have just given it a little bit extra energy here, just a little bit extra. I mean, I'll just put here the GQ100 again, halfway, just maybe get halfway to the energy of the GQ100, you know, something along the lines of the Fudu, for example. And the GQ20 would have been perfect in my opinion, but nevertheless it deserves its merit. It's another attempt from Geek World, so it deserves its attempt in that aspect. Okay, anyway guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions you might have, please feel free to ask me. Take care, bye bye.